The empty space where Earth's moon once orbited was like a scar across the night sky. For 50 years, that dark spot had reminded every species in the galaxy that even humans could be defeated. The Battle of Seoul was over, humanity was gone, and the winners were busy picking through what remained. Captain Hyanwu pressed his crystalline hand against the control panel of his salvage ship. His crew moved quietly through the bridge, their translucent bodies catching the light from distant stars. The Zephyrians had been assigned this sector of the old human territory, and there was good money in human scrap metal. Another piece of their old fleet, Captain, reported his scanning officer, pointing at the twisted wreckage floating past their viewport. Looks like it was one of their destroyers. Hyanwu nodded. Humans had built their ships strong. He had to admit that much. Even after 50 years drifting in space, the metal held its shape. Their weapons were crude compared to Zephyrian crystal technology, but they had hit hard when they worked. Not hard enough, obviously. The asteroid belt ahead of them sparkled with debris. This was where the final battle had taken place, where the last human fleet had made their desperate stand. The story said they had fought until every ship was destroyed, every crew member dead. It was almost admirable, if you ignored how pointless it had been. Take us deeper into the belt, Hyanwu ordered. The heavy metals will be concentrated near the larger asteroids. His ship moved carefully between the floating rocks. Some were natural asteroids that had been here since the solar system formed. Others were the remains of human mining stations, torn apart in the fighting. The humans had always been good at digging things out of rock, even if they were terrible at knowing when to quit. Captain, I'm getting some strange readings. The sensor operator's voice carried a note of confusion. Grid 77 Alpha is showing power signatures. Hyanwu's crystalline features shifted into what humans might have called a smile. Probably just old batteries still holding a charge. Human technology was basic, but it lasted forever. But as they moved closer to the source, the readings grew stronger, much stronger. Deep inside the asteroid called Ceres, something was drawing massive amounts of power. Something that should have been dead and cold for half a century. Sir, the operator said, his voice now tight with worry. Those aren't old batteries. Something down there is actively using power, a lot of power. The amusement faded from Hyanwu's expression. The galaxy had celebrated when humanity finally fell because they had been different from every other species. Most races knew when to surrender, when to accept that they had lost. Humans never did. They kept fighting even when fighting was hopeless. If any part of that stubborn human spirit still existed somewhere in this dead system. Full scan of that asteroid, he commanded. I want to know what we're looking at. The results made no sense. The asteroid should have been nothing but rock and ice, maybe some old mining tunnels. Instead, their scanners showed massive hollow spaces inside, connected by tunnels that ran for kilometers, and all of it was powered by energy sources that their equipment couldn't identify. Captain, there are structures in there, reported his science officer. Big ones, and they're not natural formations. Hyanwu stared at the scanner display. The Zephyrians had been the first to arrive in the Sol system after the battle ended. They had found nothing but wreckage and dead worlds. Every survey had confirmed that humanity was extinct, that their civilization was completely destroyed. But if humans had built something inside Ceres, something hidden deep enough that 50 years of surveys had missed it. Are there any life signs? He asked. Negative, sir, but the power signatures are getting stronger. Whatever's down there, it's waking up. The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of their ship's systems. Through the viewport, Ceres looked like any other asteroid, gray, pocked with craters, utterly lifeless, but their instruments told a different story. Sir, should we contact the fleet command? Asked his communications officer. Hyanwu considered this. If he was wrong, if this was just some old human automated system finally breaking down, he would look foolish. But if he was right, if humanity had somehow survived in secret, the galaxy's three major powers had spent 50 years dividing up human territory and resources. They had strip-mined human worlds, sold human artifacts as curiosities, and generally acted as if the extinct species had never mattered at all. This was possible because everyone knew humans were gone. But what if they weren't? Prep the boarding pods, Hyanwu ordered, and send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we may have found something they need to know about. As his crew prepared for the boarding operation, Hyanwu kept staring at the innocent-looking asteroid. Somewhere deep inside that rock, something that should have been dead was very much alive, and if it was what he feared it might be, the galaxy was about to learn that writing off humanity had been a very big mistake. The humans had always been too stubborn to stay dead. Lieutenant Sujin was checking her boarding pod systems when the asteroid started shooting at them. One moment she was preparing to land on what looked like a dead rock, and the next moment laser beams were cutting through space around her ship. What the hell? She shouted into her radio as her pod's shields flared bright blue under the attack. The energy beams were coming from hidden ports that had suddenly opened all over the asteroid's surface. Weapons that shouldn't exist were firing with perfect accuracy. All pods, retreat now. Captain Hyenwoo's voice crackled through the communication system. The entire asteroid is a weapons platform. Sujin pulled her pod into a sharp turn, feeling the artificial gravity slam her against her seat. Behind her she could see other Zephyrian boarding pods trying to escape the sudden barrage. Two weren't fast enough. Their shields collapsed under the concentrated fire, and the pods exploded in bright flashes. The weapons tracking them weren't random automated defenses. They moved with intelligence, predicting where the fleeing pods would go and firing ahead of them. This was military-grade targeting software, the kind humans had used in their warships. But that was impossible. All human military installations had been destroyed 50 years ago. Captain, these weapons are too advanced, Sujin reported as she finally reached safe distance. The targeting systems are better than anything humans had during the war. I know, Hyenwoo replied grimly, and that's not the worst part. As if summoned by his words, voices began speaking on their communication channels. Human voices, speaking in the old human languages that should have died with their species. The words were unclear, but the tone was unmistakable. They were coordinating, planning, organizing. This is impossible, whispered the communication officer. Reconfirmed human extinction. Every survey team, every intelligence report, they're all dead. But the voices kept talking and more weapons kept firing from the asteroid. Hidden doors were opening all over Ceres, revealing gun ports and sensor arrays that had been built into the rock itself. The entire asteroid had been turned into a fortress, and someone was manning the controls. On the other side of the galaxy, Admiral Minho of the Kethari Collective was dealing with his own impossible situation. The Kethari were a hive mind, millions of individual creatures connected into one shared consciousness. They had always found humans disturbing because humans couldn't be absorbed into the collective. Each human mind stayed separate, chaotic, unpredictable. When humanity fell, Minho had been relieved. The galaxy was more orderly without them. Now his intelligence officers were bringing him reports that made no sense. Sir, the human colony on Kepler 4 for 2b is showing massive power signatures, reported his coordinator, a thin creature with large multifaceted eyes. The settlement went dark during the final war, but now it's broadcasting again. Minho's mandibles clicked together nervously. Impossible. We surveyed that world. Nothing but empty buildings and dead machinery. That's what we thought, sir. But our long-range sensors are detecting underground structures that weren't there before, or weren't visible before. More reports were flooding in from across the former human territories. The Mars orbital stations, which had been floating dead in space for decades, suddenly started moving under their own power. On Proxima Centauri, B, entire cities were rising from underground bunkers that no survey had ever detected. How many installations have come back online? Minho asked, though he dreaded the answer. 17 confirmed reactivations, sir, and the number keeps growing. It appears the humans never actually died. Minho felt a chill run through his shared consciousness. The collective mind of his species was experiencing something like fear for the first time in centuries. And where have they been for 50 years? The answer came from his deep space monitoring station. Long-range sensors had detected construction activity around dead stars in systems that were supposed to be empty. Massive structures that hadn't been there a year ago were now clearly visible, built around stellar bodies that the galactic powers had written off as worthless. Sir, his coordinator continued, we're also receiving reports from Zephyrian and Vorthok territories. Human installations are activating everywhere. They're not just in the Sol system. Minho stared at the holographic display showing the locations of reactivated human sites. They formed a pattern across the galaxy, connected by hidden supply lines and communication networks that had somehow escaped detection for half a century. The humans hadn't just survived their supposed extinction. They had spent 50 years building in secret, spreading across star systems that everyone else had ignored, preparing for something that was only now becoming clear. Send word to the other powers, Minho ordered. Emergency council meeting. If the humans have been hiding and building for 50 years. He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone in the collective consciousness understood. The galaxy had celebrated humanity's defeat and divided up their territories. The major powers had grown comfortable, secure in the knowledge that the most dangerous species was extinct, but comfort was a luxury they could no longer afford. The humans were back, and they had been very busy during their absence. The galaxy was about to learn what 50 years of human planning looked like. Admiral Jinwoo walked slowly around the central command deck of humanity's crown, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied the massive holographic displays floating in the air around him. The space station was enormous, larger than most cities, and it hummed with the quiet power of technology that shouldn't have been possible. What made it even more impressive was that according to all official records, it didn't exist. A year ago, this entire section of space had been empty. Now it housed millions of humans who were supposed to be dead. "Bring up the full tactical display," Jinwoo said to his operations officer. The air above the command center filled with points of light, each one representing a human installation that had been hidden for the past 50 years. They stretched across the galaxy like a vast web, connected by supply lines and communication networks that had been built in complete secrecy. "Impressive, isn't it?" Jinwoo said to the assembled commanders standing around the holographic map. "While the galaxy was celebrating our extinction, we were actually preparing for our return." Commander Yeonhai stepped forward to get a better look at the display. She looked mostly human, but there were subtle differences. Her eyes held a faint electronic glow, and her movements were too precise, too calculated. She was one of the new generation, enhanced with artificial intelligence that let her think faster than any normal human ever could. "The mining operations are ahead of schedule," she reported. "The self-replicating swarms have processed 3 entire asteroid belts in the past month." Jinwoo nodded and gestured to the main display. "Show them the Titan project." The hologram shifted to show something that made even the experienced commanders gasp. Around dead stars that the galaxy had written off as worthless, massive construction frameworks stretched through space. They were building structures so large that entire planets could fit inside them. Clouds of tiny machines moved through the construction sites like metallic insects, each one no bigger than a human fist, but working together in perfect coordination. They stripped apart asteroids and converted the raw materials into building components, then assembled those components into structures that dwarfed anything the galaxy's major powers had ever attempted. "Each swarm contains 10 million individual units," Jinwoo explained. "They can replicate themselves using any available materials. Give them a dead solar system, and they'll turn it into a fully functional industrial complex within 6 months." The commanders studied the display with fascination and pride. For 50 years, they had lived in hiding, watching as the galaxy's powers divided up human territory and sold human artifacts like old furniture. They had been forced to stay quiet, to let the galaxy think humanity was extinct, while they built their strength in secret. But that time was over. "Sir," said Commander Jamin, "we're receiving communication requests from all 3 major powers. The Vorthok Empire is demanding immediate explanations for our reappearance." Jinwoo's expression hardened. The Vorthok were the oldest civilization in the galaxy, and they had always looked down on humanity as a young, chaotic species. When the humans had fallen, the Vorthok had been the first to claim human worlds for themselves. "The Vorthok want explanations," Jinwoo said. "Tell them we didn't survive the Battle of Seoul. The humans they knew died that day. What came back is something entirely new." This was true in more ways than one. The humans who had gone into hiding 50 years ago had used that time to change themselves. Some, like Yeonhai, had merged their consciousness with artificial intelligence systems. Others had modified their bodies to survive in the vacuum of space or to withstand radiation that would kill normal humans. They were still human in spirit, but they had evolved beyond what they had been before. "What about the Cathari Collective?" asked another commander. "They're mobilizing their fleets." Jinwoo smiled coldly. The Cathari hive mind had always been disturbed by human individuality. It preferred species that could be absorbed into their collective consciousness, controlled and directed by the hive. Humans had been too chaotic, too independent. "Let them mobilize," he said. "They'll find that we're not the same species they remember." The enhanced commanders around him nodded in perfect synchronization. Their artificial intelligence components allowed them to share tactical information instantly, to coordinate their actions with superhuman precision. They were individuals, but they could work together like a hive mind when necessary. It was the best of both approaches, human creativity and independence, combined with perfect coordination and planning. "Sir Yeonhai said, the Zephyrians are requesting a meeting. They want to negotiate." "Of course they do." Jinwoo replied. They're the ones who've been strip mining our old colonies. They know what's coming. He turned to face his commanders, his expression serious. For 50 years, we've been preparing for this moment. We've built our strength, evolved our capabilities, and planned our return. The galaxy thought we were gone, but we were just getting started. The holographic display showed the true scope of their preparations. Hidden fleets, secret colonies, industrial complexes built around dead stars, and millions of enhanced humans ready to reclaim what had been taken from them. Begin Phase 2, Jinwoo commanded. It's time to remind the galaxy why they feared us in the first place. The commanders saluted and moved to their stations. Across the galaxy, human installations began powering up weapons systems that had been hidden for decades. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to adapt, survive, and come back stronger than before. The real war was just beginning. General Taiho expected the humans to return the way they had always fought, with massive warships charging straight into battle, guns blazing, and shields at maximum power. That was how humans had always done things, direct and loud and impossible to ignore. Instead, they came like ghosts. The first sign of their presence was when the Zephyrian defense platforms around New Crystalline stopped responding to commands. The massive weapons stations that protected the colony's orbital space simply went quiet, their crystal-powered guns turning to point at empty space. Status report, Taiho demanded from his command ship's bridge. Unknown, sir, his communications officer replied, his crystalline features flickering with confusion. The platforms are receiving our signals, but they're not following orders. It's like something else is controlling them. Through the viewport, Taiho could see tiny specks of light moving between the defense platforms. At first glance, they looked like space debris or small asteroids drifting in the void. But as he watched, he realized they were moving with purpose, following precise flight patterns. Magnify Sector 7, he ordered. The main screen zoomed in to show what looked like metal seeds, each no larger than a personal transport pod. There were thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands, and they were attaching themselves to every piece of Zephyrian technology they could find. Sir, the platforms are turning their weapons on us, reported his tactical officer with barely controlled panic. Taiho watched in horror as the defense stations that were supposed to protect the colony began targeting Zephyrian ships. The weapons systems that his people had built were being used against them, controlled by an intelligence that understood their technology better than they did. How are they doing this? Demanded Chancellor Krista over the communication link. From the planet's surface, those platforms use quantum-encrypted control systems. Nothing should be able to hack them. Their technology appears to be self-modifying, Taiho explained, though he barely understood what he was seeing. Each small craft seems to learn from what it encounters, then shares that information with all the others instantly. It was like watching a virus spread through a computer system, except this virus was made of metal and moved through space. Every Zephyrian system the small craft touched became part of their network, turned against its original creators. But the worst part was that this wasn't even a real attack. The humans weren't trying to destroy the Zephyrian fleet or conquer their territory. They were simply taking control of everything and then ignoring it. The weapons platforms stopped firing once they proved they could. The human craft moved onto other targets, leaving the Zephyrians helpless but alive. Across the galaxy, similar reports were flooding in from every major power. The Cathari Collective found their hive mind communication networks corrupted by signals they couldn't decode. The ancient Vorthok Empire watched as their most powerful warships simply shut down when the tiny human craft attached to their hulls. The humans weren't fighting a war in any traditional sense. They were performing surgery on galactic civilization, cutting out the parts they didn't like and rewiring the rest to serve their purposes. Admiral Soyoung of the Vorthok fleet tried to engage what looked like a small scouting force near the edge of their territory. His massive dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying a small moon, moved to intercept a handful of the tiny human craft. But when the battle began, Soyoung realized he wasn't fighting a small group of ships. Every human craft in the system was somehow connected to every other one. When he fired at one target, they all seemed to learn from the experience. When he tried a new tactic, they adapted instantly. It was like fighting a single enormous enemy that happened to be spread across thousands of individual bodies. No matter how many of the small craft his weapons destroyed, the others kept coming, each one a little smarter than the last. They're learning faster than we can adapt, Soyoung reported to the Vorthok High Command. Every strategy we try, they counter within minutes. It's as if they can think collectively while still maintaining individual initiative. The human strategy became clear over the following weeks. They weren't interested in occupying worlds or enslaving populations. Instead, they systematically dismantled the infrastructure that had allowed the galaxy's major powers to prosper during humanity's absence. Trade routes were severed by craft that could disable any ship trying to pass through. Communication networks were corrupted by signals that turned friendly systems against each other. Resource extraction facilities found their equipment converted to serve human purposes, sending materials to destinations no one could identify. The galaxy's powers tried to fight back, but their traditional military tactics were useless against an enemy that learned from every engagement and shared that knowledge instantly across their entire force. Finally, Admiral Soyoung received a transmission that was broadcast simultaneously to every government in the galaxy. The message came from a woman who identified herself as Admiral Day One of the reformed human fleet. "You had 50 years to show us what kind of galaxy you wanted," she said calmly. "We've seen enough." The transmission ended there, but the message was clear. The humans had returned to judge what the galaxy had become in their absence, and they had found it wanting. For the first time in thousands of years, the great powers of the galaxy knew what it felt like to be helpless. The humans were back, and they were nothing like the species that had fallen 50 years ago. They had become something far more dangerous. They had become patient. The war ended in a way that no one expected. There was no final battle, no surrender ceremony, no peace treaty signed in blood. Instead, every government in the galaxy received the same message at exactly the same moment, broadcast to every screen and communication device simultaneously. This should have been impossible. The distances between worlds meant that even the fastest signals took years to travel from one end of the galaxy to the other. But somehow, every leader was watching the same transmission at the same time, as if the laws of physics had been temporarily suspended. Admiral Day One appeared on the screens, but he wasn't broadcasting from a ship or a space station. Behind him, massive structures moved through what looked like the heart of a star, converting stellar fire into energy that fed construction projects larger than entire worlds. "You wrote us off too soon," he said calmly, his voice carrying across 1,000 different languages through translation systems that had been corrupted by human technology. "You assumed that breaking our fleets meant breaking our spirit. You were wrong." The camera slowly pulled back to show the impossible scope of what humanity had built. They hadn't just constructed hidden bases or secret fleets. They had built a shell around an entire star, capturing all of its energy and using it to power construction projects that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. A Dyson sphere, the theoretical megastructure that most civilizations considered impossible to build. Humanity had not only built one, they had done it in complete secrecy while the galaxy thought they were extinct. "We're not here to conquer," Day One continued, his image broadcast to the leadership of every major power. "We're here to establish new rules." Chancellor Krista of the Zephyrian Assembly watched the transmission from his crystal palace, his translucent form flickering with emotions that had no names. The structures moving behind the human admiral were larger than Zephyrian cities, powered by energy that could supply entire star systems. "The first rule is simple," Day One said. "Never assume humanity is finished just because you can't see us anymore." Admiral Minho of the Cathari Collective felt the shared consciousness of his species recoil in something like terror. The hive mind was processing the implications of what they were seeing, and every calculation led to the same conclusion. Humanity had become something beyond their ability to comprehend or control. "For 50 years, you divided up our worlds like we were never coming back," the human admiral continued. "You strip-mined our colonies, sold our artifacts, and treated our civilization like ancient history. We watched, we learned, we prepared." The camera showed construction yards where ships were being built that followed no design principles the galaxy recognized. They moved like living things, adapting their shape as they flew, equipped with technology that seemed to learn and evolve. "In real time, we could have announced our return with violence," Day One said. "We could have taken back our worlds by force. But we decided to do something better. We decided to build something new." The transmission shifted to show other star systems, other impossible constructions. Humanity hadn't just built one Dyson sphere, they had built dozens, each one powering industrial complexes that converted raw stellar energy into forms of matter and energy that the galaxy had never imagined. "The old rules don't apply anymore," Day One announced. "The galaxy will no longer be divided between the strong and the weak, the conquerors and the conquered. We're establishing a new order, one based on cooperation rather than domination. The leaders watching the transmission felt the weight of their mistakes settling on their shoulders like a physical burden. They had grown comfortable during humanity's absence, secure in the knowledge that the most unpredictable species in the galaxy was gone forever, but comfort was a luxury they could no longer afford. "We're transmitting coordinates to representatives of every major government," Day One said. "You're invited to meet with us and discuss how this new galaxy will function. This is not a negotiation, it's an explanation of how things will be." The transmission ended with a simple message: "Humanity has returned. We suggest you get used to it." Admiral Day One closed the communication link and turned to look out through the transparent walls of his command center. Outside, the captured fire of an entire star-powered construction projects that would reshape the galaxy. Ships moved through the energy fields like fish, swimming through light, their hulls absorbing power that would let them travel between stars in days rather than years. "Sir," his aide reported, "we're receiving responses from the galactic powers. They want to know what our demands are." Day One smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. "Tell them we don't have demands, we have expectations. And the first expectation is that they remember what happened the last time they thought humanity was finished. The galaxy had laughed when they thought Earth was destroyed. They had celebrated when they thought human civilization was extinct. They had grown fat and comfortable while dividing up the scraps of human territory. They wouldn't be laughing again. Humanity had returned, and they had brought with them technology that made the old balance of power irrelevant. The galaxy would learn to live with the new rules, or it would learn what happened to civilizations that couldn't adapt. The choice, as always, was theirs to make.